Hey guys, Mr. Ridgway here. So our next lesson, we are done with the Civil War. We are now going to be asking ourselves, what next? So go ahead, get the warm-up question that's here. Okay, get that done. And then kind of part two for our warm-up is kind of our, again, building this reflection paper that we've been working on. So, again, go ahead, open up that doc. We, in terms of where we are so far with this thing, or where you should be, again, this is our critical thinking paper that we're just kind of typing down broad reflection pieces in. So far, we have done the two pieces that you see right here, and that is we've described the overall scope of American history from 1491. Again, that was about a paragraph. We've described with each of those three chunks that you see there, a theme from them and maybe an example. Again, you're kind of treating those like, test paragraphs. And now we have this third part. And this third part kind of sets us up for the rest of the paper. So here's all we need to do with this. Okay, there's no writing for this right now. I just want you to spend some time and kind of think. So we have these three time periods, 1491 to 1750, 1750 to 1800, and 1800 to 1850. And we need to now start to think about which one do you think is the most significant when looking at defining U.S. history. And I just want you to kind of take 5 minutes, go back through our mini lessons and activities and, big topics that we talked about. Just the titles of the lessons might be helpful there. And think, if you had to pick one of those three chunks, which one do you think would be the one that would convince you most that you have to understand in order to get U.S. history? So I'm going to let you guys, just take 5 minutes, browse back through our lessons and just kind of think about it. I don't want you to write anything down. I don't want you to do anything with it. And we will kind of go from there, okay? So that's part two of the warm-up. Let's go ahead and talk about what our objectives are here for today. So we only have really one mini lesson. That's it. I need to even change around this agenda. It's from old stuff that I need to fix. So we just, bell, warm-up, mini lesson. That's it. But we have two specific things we're going to be focusing on in this mini lesson. And now that the Civil War is over, there's going to be some different plans for reunification of the Union. You need to know and be able to explain what the four different plans were. And then we're going to talk about understanding kind of the tensions that are inside and in between those different plans for Reconstruction. So let's talk about what those are. Okay. So again, grab the notes page for our mini lesson here. We first are going to have to talk about presidential and radical Reconstruction. So let's get to that. Really, our focus here, is going to be on the politics of it, on the questions about power and how forgiveness, right? So our question here: how should you treat an enemy of war after you've conquered them? Like, do you just beat them to a pulp? Do you give them you give them some kind of leniency or forgiveness? There's a lot of very, very profound kind of questions that are going to come out of this. Again, you want to reunify the country. That was the goals. Again, one of the goals of the North. But you also had this other goal of, vanquishing slavery and getting rid of that system. Now, one thing to note here, this mini lesson is not going to deal with the experience of Black Americans during Reconstruction. That is a topic, again, not because it's not important. It is a topic that is literally worth so much time, that we need to dedicate a whole nother lesson to that. And so we're going to push that back to the next lesson. So let's talk about the aftermath of the Civil War. Basically, there are 600,000, 700,000 Americans dead. The North has lost a lot more, in absolute numbers, but the South has lost relatively more. The South loses 1 out of 5 of every single one of its white men. The South, besides that, way more than the North, is just utterly crippled whether it's farmland or the city of Atlanta, which is just, again, burned to the ground. A third of all Southern livestock is gone. Thousands of miles of roads and railroads have been torn up and or completely shredded. It's a disaster. Okay, and so the South is going to have to be rebuilt, and that is the whole theme of Reconstruction. Okay, the question though is going to be, what are we reconstructing and to what ends? So let's get into that. Okay, let's just talk about the politics of it. Okay, so this, what we're going to present here, okay, is talking about how we're going to be treating the South, the North, speaking from the Northern perspective here, after the war is over. Okay, so Lincoln is going to be the first one to come up with a plan. Okay, so in 1864, the writing is kind of sort of on the wall towards the end of 1864, and Lincoln starts developing what he's going to call the 10% plan, or it gets nicknamed after the 10% plan. And the general philosophy of this plan is general kind of forgiveness. Okay, so here's what goes into the 10% plan. For all Southerners, okay, Confederates specifically, who swore, who had raised arms against the North, as long as 10% of a state's population would swear allegiance to the Union and accept emancipation, then their states could come back into the Union. And if you think about 10%, that's not very much, right? It's only 1 out of every 10 white males who are able to vote at this time. So if of their voters, 10% of them swear allegiance to the Union, they can come back in, okay, as long as they accept emancipation. And this plan would have happened, except Lincoln gets assassinated, which is going to throw this completely into contention. So I'll very briefly give you an overview of Lincoln's assassination here, for those who are not familiar with it. Lincoln, really, towards the very end of the war, it's very obvious the North is going to win. He decides to, with his wife, go to a play at Ford's Theater, which I highly recommend that you go visit sometime in your life. It's very interesting. He goes and visits Ford's Theater, is watching a play called My American Cousin, very well known at this time. John Wilkes Booth, okay, who is a disaffected actor, less successful than his brother, who was also another famous actor. He was a Southern sympathizer, and when the South loses the Civil War, meaning Lee surrenders at Appomattox, it's clearly coming to an end. He is planning and plotting with a group of other individuals to basically, at first, it was to kidnap members of Lincoln's cabinet. That gets changed all of a sudden to assassination, but I'll get to that in a second. So they plan to kidnap or assault multiple members of Lincoln's cabinet. This does actually happen for a couple of them. Most of Wilkes's compatriots chicken out. As you can see here, many of them got hanged. But Mr. Booth, he decides, after hearing that Lincoln is going to be attending this play, that he's going to change his plot from kidnapping Abraham Lincoln to assassinating him. And so, because he was a well-known actor, and he's at this theater, they let him in the actor's door, very common at this time. He goes up behind Lincoln's booth, shoots him in the head, and Lincoln dies the following morning. The reason why, if you look at actually this picture, they take Lincoln across the street, and he actually lived on, for quite a few hours. And he's actually kind of laying across the bed there because he's so tall that the bed wouldn't actually fit him. So Lincoln dies, and that is going to be the first president who ever gets assassinated. Won't be the last. And there we go. So Lincoln's gone, right? And let's find out then what's going to happen next. Well, let's hear about I guess we'll resurrect Lincoln here for a second. Sorry, Lincoln. You're gonna have to go back to vampire hunting here for a moment. If you're not familiar with that book. Lincoln also then was dealing with Republicans. Again, remember the Republican Party is in the, it is really the only party in the U.S. government, right? Because all the Democrats have left. They all did the whole secession thing. And so during and after the war, Congress was dominated by what came to be known as the radical Republicans. And Republicans in the Civil War, rightly so, perhaps, they're angry at the Democrats. They're like, this was your fault. You seceded. And so their philosophy is to punish the South. They're going to make them feel the pain of what they made the country go through. And along with that, okay, they're also going to try to enable black rights. And so the plan that the radical Republicans come up with for Reconstruction and how things are going to reunify politically is something called the Wade-Davis Bill. Okay, so I will move my face here so you can actually see this. So the Wade-Davis Bill said that this, and you can kind of understand that all of a sudden this isn't realistic. Okay, you can kind of get the point is punishment. Here's what the Wade-Davis Bill said. The majority, 51% of each southern state. Okay, so 51% of every state, meaning 1 out of every 2 southerners, would have to say that they had taken an oath, okay, like swear on it, that they never supported the Confederacy in the past. So not just like a loyalty oath to the Union, which would also be in there, that they also never supported the Confederacy. And again, you look at this and you're like, that's never going to happen. Obviously, more than half of Southerners were involved in, supporting the, you're right, it just doesn't work out statistically. And of course, then they put in the thing in their state constitutions must ban slavery and, go with all that stuff. The thing that happens to this, though, okay, and again, we're resurrecting Lincoln here for a second, is when Lincoln gets this bill in 1864, he does something called a pocket veto. Now, this is a very, very special thing, and the reason why Lincoln does this is a real way to kill a bill. Lincoln looks at this, and he's like, this will never happen. However, he can't tick off Republicans, so what he does, in order for, because again, if you think about Congress and the presidency and how this all works, is that if Lincoln would have just normal vetoed this bill, he would send it back to the House and Senate. Obviously, they're only full of Republicans at this time. There's no Democrats there. They would override his veto, and the bill would have become law. So knowing he can't do that, because again, he doesn't want this to become law. This isn't Lincoln's philosophy. Again, it's not like Lincoln's a Southern sympathizer here. He just has a different approach to it. He waits. He has the bill literally sit on his desk until the end of the congressional session in 1864, and he just never signs it or vetoes it. And so it's called a pocket veto, like he put it in his pocket for later. And what that does, it's a special kind of thing you can do as a president. It's just perma kills the bill. Okay, it will never come back. And so that's the end of the Wade-Davis Bill. Now, let's find out then the actual thing which really did actually happen. Okay, the real plan. It's called the Johnson Plan. Now, this man right above my head here, that is Andrew Johnson, who shares now the very, very odd coincidence of also, besides Donald Trump, being the only president that ever served one term and was impeached. So let's talk about how that happened and what happened here. So who is this Andrew Johnson guy? Well, he was Lincoln's vice president. Now, he was not Lincoln's vice president in Lincoln's first term from 1860 to 1864. He is a new guy who was added to the ticket in 1864 to try to make Lincoln's renomination in 1864 more attractive. And if you look at who he is, okay, you can see here it says that he was a pro-slavery unionist from Tennessee. Think about that for a second. You agree that slavery, or you think that slavery is right, but you think that the South was wrong in seceding. And so he's very odd because Andrew Johnson refused to join the South in secession, but this makes for Lincoln the perfect running mate in 1864 because he can obviously pick up states that would be more sympathetic to an Andrew Johnson than, for example, like an Abraham Lincoln. So he makes the perfect running mate in 1864, but nobody ever expected him to become president. And this is where it's going to be a disaster. So Andrew Johnson, just quick background on him. He's a dumpster fire of a mess. He grows up super poor, really, really angry at rich whites in Tennessee, who he basically had like a kind of like chip on his shoulder about them his entire life. He also had he was an alcoholic, is basically the straightforward way to put it. He's drunk on Inauguration Day and actually is almost unable to finish, slurs through his entire, oath of office, and again, a hot mess of a dude. So he is going to be the person that is going to put forward the plan for the South to rejoin. This is the Johnson plan, and it was actually done. So here, let's go ahead and read it, and then we'll kind of process it here in a second. So the Johnson plan: pardon Confederates who swore allegiance to the Confederate States of America. Okay. States can hold a constitutional convention without 10%, without 51%, whatever. Just hold a constitutional convention. As long as you say secession was bad, and you say no more slavery in name only, you can join the Union. That's all it takes. So the Johnson plan is extremely lenient. I'm like talking like borderline, like, yep, you're back in. And so what he starts to do without Congress, as you can see here, if you're pardoning all Confederates who swore allegiance to the Constitutional Convention, states can just rapidly hold their own constitutional conventions as long as they say secession's bad, no more slavery. We'll use that word here, but of course Southerners will come up with their own ways to, of course, keep black people basically in pretty much slavery. Then they can come back to the Union. And so the Johnson plan is just like, yep, come on back, let's go. And he just starts rapidly readmitting Southern states to come back in. And so radical Republicans look at this and they're like, what is happening? What is going on? It's a disaster in terms of the radical Republicans and what they were expecting that was going to go on. So I'd like to hear, again, just write this out in your notes. What approach, the 10% plan, Wade Davis bill, or Johnson plan, do you believe is most appropriate for the South? Now, if you disagree with all of those, and you're like, they're all terrible, how are you going to unsecede the South? And I'm speaking here politically. Okay, so what do they have to agree to? How are you going to make them rejoin? So go ahead and type out something on your notes. Maybe just a couple of general things or criteria they might have to meet. So let's talk about then, obviously what is coming next is Johnson and the radical Republicans in Congress getting into it. Okay, now again, just to specify here, Congress is dominated by radical Republicans. In fact, they won't even let most Democrats come back and take their seats at this time. So here's what basically happens. Okay, Johnson is like, yeah, come on, Southern states, everybody back in, let's go. With, like very few stipulations besides saying no slavery, quote unquote. And secession was bad. Don't do that again. So what does the South do? Well, again, South's let back in. The South starts passing something called the Black Codes. Eventually they will get morphed and changed into something that will later be called Jim Crow. And Congress starts to try to block some of this legislation coming out of the South, some of these Black Codes. And what happens? Well, Congress tries to pass a law saying these Black Codes are bad. Johnson vetoes them, and then Congress, again, they have this power. It's okay, as long as 2/3 of them agree, they override his veto. And so this pattern that I have here down at the bottom just happens over and over and over and over again. So here it is. The South will pass some kind of anti-Black law. It'll resist Reconstruction. Or, for example, like the radical Republicans in Congress will try to pass some kind of Reconstruction legislation. Johnson will veto it, and then Congress will override his veto with a 2/3 majority. And this just goes on and on and on again. This is not really a way to have a functioning government. Now, basically over Johnson's vetoes, this is what's going to lead us to the fourth plan of Reconstruction, which is kind of also a new phase, and that is Congressional Reconstruction, or as it's better known, Radical Reconstruction. Okay, and let's talk about then here what this plan is. Okay, so again, it's radical Republicans running the show. What you need to know, what Radical Reconstruction is dominated by, okay, is the Reconstruction Act of 1867. Okay, so let's kind of take a moment to look at this map down here, and I'll give you a way to think about it. Okay, so the Reconstruction Act divides the South into 5 military districts. So think like the Hunger Games, right? Like District 1, District 2, District 3, District 4, you get the idea. Now, most of these districts have 2 or 3 states in them. That's kind of how they worked. And the South is going to be occupied by the Union military. Again, it's like the Hunger Games, right? Until they get all new state constitutions written and approved by Congress. So basically, the whole premise of this is we're taking away the whole Johnson plan thing. That's all gone. Get it out of here. And the states have to restart. And here's a couple of new things they had to add. So again, besides these constitutions being written and approved by Congress, they had to accept the 13th Amendment, which is a new amendment to the Constitution that said that slavery is not a thing anymore. And then the 14th Amendment, which is the Equal Rights Amendment. Arguably, the 14th Amendment is the most important amendment that's ever been added to the Constitution ever. We'll get into that more in future blocks. Okay? What you need to understand out of this is that the changes that we're about to see in the South, and we'll get to these more next lesson, they're only going to happen because the South is being occupied by the Union military. If that goes away, it's going to be like a house of cards, and those changes are going to disappear. So we will leave that happening here for another lesson. We'll get to redemption later. I kind of hinted that it was coming. Again, because of Johnson being a jerk, particularly about the 14th Amendment and also the Reconstruction Act, again, because he tries to oppose them or veto them. Johnson is basically going to find himself in the first ever impeachment trial for a U.S. president. Basically what happens is he decides to commit the now, which seems to happen all the time, kind of Twitter wars of his time. He trashes some of his Republican colleagues openly. He later tries to actually get some of them fired from his own administration. Again, many of these had been people that had been there since Lincoln. Congress impeaches him, and they only fall short by 1 vote. Clearly, though, even though Johnson is still around for then about another year, okay, that's all he was there for. He is, the Republicans are never going to put him back on the ticket again, and that will be taken up by another person. So let's talk about kind of the overall picture of what we need to come out of this. Okay, so again, you need to know the 4 plans for Reconstruction, which again were the 10% plan, okay, the Wade-Davis bill, the Johnson plan, and then the Reconstruction Act of 1867. And hopefully then you kind of saw some of the tensions in there about how do we decide how we readmit them, right? There are 3 general phases that historians give to the whole Reconstruction thing. So the first one is presidential Reconstruction. We saw that with Lincoln and Johnson. Okay, again, Johnson's the only one that actually happened. Radical Reconstruction, we saw with Congress's plans and the Reconstruction Act of 1867. The last phase of Reconstruction is going to be redemption, and that is when the Union Army is going to end its occupation of the South, and the black rights and some of the very, very significant accomplishments and protections that existed for them are going to be smothered by the juggernaut that is Jim Crow. So we will talk about redemption in a later block. Here's what I'd like you to do for your exit ticket. This is on the bottom of your notes. I'd like you to explain the 4 plans for reunification with 2 hashtags each. Okay, and then explain why Andrew Johnson and Congress opposed one another and the outcome of their feud using another 2 hashtags. Okay, so it's a 10 hashtag exit ticket. Once you do that, that's the end of our lesson, and I will see you guys on our next lesson, where we talk about some of the really, really cool developments that happened for Black Americans during congressional Reconstruction. So I'll see you later. Bye-bye.